We are joined now by Michigan State Representative Graham Filler. Representative Filler is the sponsor of House Bill 5368 that would require dates of birth to remain in publicly accessible court records. Representative, thanks so much for joining us today to talk about this.
Yeah, thanks for taking on this really important issue.
All right, so I want to start a little ways back. Let's take one step backwards and talk to me a little bit about how you felt when you first heard about this court rule that started everything about redacting the dates of birth.
Yeah, I'm not some kind of expert in background checks. That's for other folks. I don't own a business where I have to hire folks. And so I just figured I would listen. And to be honest, the rule seemed so impactful that I brought in all the stakeholders for a meeting in my office. And I really believe that a solution would be found, because if the rule happened tomorrow, it's going to be quite, it's going to change a lot of things in the state of Michigan for businesses. And so no solution was found. So I put House Bill 5368 out into the public for discussion. I have received a lot of support. And I'll be giving a speech as we voted out of the Michigan House of Representatives today and sending it to the Senate. So I'm dialed in on this now.
So what is your main concern if this rule is to go into effect on January 1?
So I've got a lot of concerns. And I guess my first one would be this is going to have a huge impact on just basic background checks in the state of Michigan, to the point that many folks won't be able to do a proper background check. Now, that has public safety concerns. That's bad for the actual job applicant. And honestly, it's bad for liability for businesses. If they hire an individual because they were unable to do a good background check, and then that individual commits some sort of crime, I mean, the liability suit against that business is going to be massive. And so those are my main concerns. And the court record is the best record, as it is in many states. And so why we are restricting so much access to that is why I put this bill forward.
So you mentioned you've spoken to the stakeholders, the background screening industry, the employers and such, but what about the other side, the Michigan Supreme Court? Have you talked to anybody over there as to why they felt this was a good idea in the first place?
Yeah, and it's a laudable goal, and I think their goal, I guess, at the start was to cut down on identity theft or fraud. And again, it's a laudable goal, but instead of sort of taking a very pointed, specific role in defeating identity fraud, they sort of dropped a nuclear bomb on the entire process by redacting all personal information and then making it very difficult to just do the basic background check, which is what my bill does, which allows for date of birth to be used for background checks, which honestly is just the status quo here in Michigan and across the country in most places. And so my bill is the simplest, shortest bill that I've ever put forward in this legislature. And that's where we're at now.
So explain to me what your bill will do if it gets passed. Does it just override the Supreme Court, or is there something more?
No, great question. So I've got to give a little basis before. Right now, if I want to come work for McDonald's, we'll call it, I fill out an application, probably online. McDonald's takes that application, gives it to the third party who does background checks, and they go to the court and say, do you have a record, Graham Filler, 81383, Clinton County in Michigan? And the court says, yes, we do. Here's the record, and it's a felony. And so it's going to be very hard maybe for them to hire me in that situation, depending. I'm sure they could. And we know that a lot of people are hiring right now in the state of Michigan. But all my bill does is says, that information can't be redacted, date of birth. And we've made a real focus on defendant's date of birth because that's what everyone's looking for in the background checks.
Well, the most important thing from our point of view is you have so many people that have common names. If you have Joe Smith, how on earth are we supposed to figure out if we have the right Joe Smith without the date of birth? Is there any other solution being offered from the courts?
This is really interesting that you would ask that. So I almost called this like the Joe Smith or Steve Johnson bill, because people under the new rule, if it goes into effect, people with a common name are going to absolutely be in trouble. And it may be very difficult to find them in the courts if there are 5 Steve Johnsons in Clinton County and you can't use date of birth, and you just go, we just can't find you. We can't hire you if we can't find you. Now that's anti-applicant. That's anti citizen who wants to get a job. And so there was sort of a fix proposed by Scale, the Supreme Court here in the state of Michigan, that said something like, well, they can go to iChat, which is sort of our Michigan State Police depository. It's where they put all the records, but it's an incomplete search. It would not stand up in court as a complete search. And honestly, if you go on iChat, state of Michigan, the website says this is an incomplete background search. Go to the courts for a more comprehensive record. So we don't view that as sort of like the fix-all at all. And they would acknowledge that it's not the fix-all. So I'm not sure why they propose that as a good backup to the courts.
What are you hearing from your fellow lawmakers?
So I think the biggest concern for my fellow lawmakers is that, number one, the Supreme Court rule is going to be a massive burden on maybe larger businesses, larger employers, because they typically use third parties. So, for instance, I've got a daughter. Her name is Claire. We call her Snacks. Anyway, let's just say I want somebody to be her tennis coach. So I want to do a background check on that individual, of course. Now, right now, I just take that individual's date of birth and I go to the court. Now, if this court rule went into effect, I would probably ask that individual, can I get you to sign a paper or something that says I can do a background check? So that's not too much of a burden on me. It's a little bit of an extra step, but whatever. For big businesses that do thousands of hirings or go through thousands of applications, that extra step is going to be a massive burden. And so I think people view this as sort of a anti-competitive. We want to make Michigan a really attractive place to go to work. And this makes it a sort of an unattractive place to do business or apply for jobs. So that's one thing they brought up. And the second thing they brought up was public safety concerns. You know, we're really trying to hire in the state of Michigan everywhere. And let's say a hospital just throws up its hands and says, you know, we couldn't really find this person. We couldn't do a complete background check. Well, we got to hire them because we're really short in this nursing ward. And then that individual, you know, is not a good candidate and has a felony on their record and then commits a crime. So they kind of view it as a public safety issue too. I think I do have support in the House. I do hope it passes today, and I'll make my same case in the Senate.
Fantastic. Well, we wish you luck, and we thank you so much for joining us today.
Yeah, thanks so much. It's a really important issue, and I'm not sure people are paying attention. And so we've just sort of had to bang the drum. I'm like the guy with the sandwich board outside the Michigan State Capitol. You know, hear ye. You know, background checks are under attack here in the state of Michigan. So I guess that's my role. But thanks so much for having me on.
All right, absolutely. Take care.